Welcome back to another episode of the You Are a Severance podcast with Callie Thomas and my partner in crime, Rodnesha Green. Thank you for following along with us thus far. We have another great episode for you. Today we'll be talking about episode 5 of season 1, the grim barbarity of optics and design. Are you ready for this episode? And spoiler alert, this title has to do with artwork, so I'm very excited about this episode.
It does.
I am an artist.
This is true, people. Our very own Callie Thomas is an artist. And since the title of this episode is based on an art piece, and so much of the Lumen world seems to be impacted by pieces of art, referencing the Keir and Egan family, I figured, why not talk to an artist about art? So just for our little opener section, we're just gonna talk about art. Yeah. Now, Callie, as you mentioned, you are an artist. Tell us a little bit about the art you do. Is it like Keir Egan's, where it's all self-portraits about the pivotal moments in your life? Like the youthful convalescence of Callie?
The narcissism needed to just paint only about yourself. No. So my artwork is primarily women of color, and I've grown to have a style of like women of color and inspirational quotes, and or like women in pop culture and either funny things they say or things that resonate with me. So I like to do a lot of like loud colors as far as backgrounds and stuff, but try to do realism when painting people. And I like to hold on to my art and rotate through it until it gets sold, because I paint stuff for me. So like I'll do commissions if you want them, but I'm gonna paint something that I'm okay to sit with too, because it could sell right away, it could sell years later.
I found it funny that you talked about how you put it in rotation, so you in a sense have your own optics and design team.
It's true.
It just rotates and then goes back into storage until it makes its way around again.
It's time to change the one over my mantle. Let's just rotate it out, and I have the rest hanging out in my spare room.
Do you have any artists that inspire your work, or that you just enjoy what they do?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because I only in recent years really pinpointed what artists I enjoy the most, at least. Maybe not always directly inspired by them, but just the ones I like in art history. And I realized this, my family went to Spain 2019, and I realized going to all those art museums, first of all, just going to museums in Europe is always so exciting for me, because I am a big art history buff. So most of the good stuff is there, right? Like we got some stuff in some museums here and they make tours here, but most of the good stuff is housed in museums there permanently, right? So it's always exciting to like go to like Italy and go to some museums or whatever. So as we're going through these museums in different cities in Spain, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, a lot of my favorite artists are actually all Spanish artists. So from Picasso to El Greco, Goya, who I will talk about later when we talk about this painting.
Okay.
But like Salvador Dali and all of that stuff. So I think I take some things from Romanticism, even though my paintings aren't directly in that style. Romanticism is all about evoking strong emotions, something that should stir something in the viewer. So I think that's kind of an indirect inspiration.
Now, you said Romanticism, and this will be my last question. You said Romanticism is all about stirring up strong emotions. Then would you, as an artist, say that these portraits that are hanging out in the Lumen offices are of the Romantic style?
I definitely think that's the style they're most trying to emulate throughout this. I think the painting in this episode does it the most successfully out of anything. And I can describe more why when we get to that. I think of all of the paintings that we've seen so far, most of them have just made me be like, that is so weird. But this one...
But is that not an emotion, Callie? Is that not a feeling?
An emotion, but this one really is the most successful, I think, for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I did not know this, so you've taught me something today. I've learned something new. I just thought anytime people mention paintings that were like in a romantic styling, I just thought it made you feel like feelings of love and romance.
Oh,
so I was like,
no,
is it just like they're painted in a way that makes them look more lovely and appealing?
No, and what's really
like
funny,
infatuating and da-da-da.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because then like if you think of it in terms of like what the word romantic, that definition of it, paintings that are like that are usually more during a Renaissance phase before Romanticism, where everything like, know, that's like that Venus painting of her coming out of the shell.
Right.
Like, you know, everything's
Right.
soft, everything's flowy, everyone's like pale and smooth. If there's multiple people in it, they're usually like intertwined. Like that's
Yes.
quote unquote romantic, but that's Renaissance style.
Ah, interesting. Oh, look at that. All right, guys, that is your art lesson for today. For any of you who are not,
to my TED Talk.
For anyone who's not an art lover or art history knower, much like myself, I'm going to take that little bit with me, and I'm going to tell everybody like it's something that I've known for always. So let's go ahead. Speaking of art and the art world, let's go ahead and jump into this episode, The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. And let me hit you guys with a quick summary now. As we did in the previous episode, we did want to throw out a little bit of a warning, heads up, trigger notice. There is, once again, depictions of self-harm and suicide attempts in this episode. We know that this is something that can be very triggering for different people or listeners. If you're watching the show, we're going to presume you've already seen the episode. But if you haven't, if you've skipped over the episode, I would skip over this podcast as well. But if you are good to go, we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware, or if you want to skip parts, you have the ability to do that throughout. With that said, let's get into our summary for episode 5. All right, guys, it's another work day for Mark. Or is it? As soon as Mark is permitted to go down to the severed floor, as soon as he gets down that elevator, he is hit with a rush of emotions that take him over because of the fact that when he last left, he had just witnessed Helly R's suicide attempt. So all of that's coming back up to him, and he is just overcome. As soon as those doors open, he's expecting to see Helly, but no, it's Cobell and Milchick, and they are the ones to greet him, which personally is not the way you want to start the day, at least not for me. They sit Mark down, and they tell him in true Lumen gaslighty fashion that the incident with Helly R happened on his watch, and essentially insinuated that he is in part to blame for what happened to her. And they just leave him with that thought. It's pretty awful. Meanwhile, Grainer brings Harmony some, quote, good news that diagnostics have been run and have proven that Petey's chip was indeed reintegrated. Speaking of good news, Mark receives word that he's about to become an uncle in this episode as well. So we head over to the fancy birthing cabins where he once again runs into Alexa the doula. Is love still in the air? I don't know. We'll see.
Was it ever?
That's a better question. But if it's not love, it's definitely seaweed, because Rickon has decked the halls with boughs of kelp strings in preparation for his daughter's arrival. A confession happens in the room between Rickon and Mark to clear the air before the arrival of his daughter, and it has Rickon wondering what Mark thinks of his latest writing endeavor, as he has heard nothing from Mark. Devin, on the other hand, decides to take a time out from all this male bonding and finds out more about the richest lady in baby camp. Devin and Gabby, as she is called, have a little coffee talk, and then Devin heads back to her cabin so she can continue in that long-suffering labor. Once her daughter is welcomed into the world, another girl is experiencing a resurrection of her own. It is Helly's first day back, and all the kind eyes in the world couldn't make her want to be there any more than she is. Helly is angry, she is upset, she is hurt, and she is now under surveillance by Miss Casey. Miss Casey, who is no longer relegated to the Wellness Center, gets to spend the day with MDR. In an effort to shirk her ever-present self, Mark sneaks Helly away for a little field trip around the office where they venture down an unknown hallway and encounter a strange sound. Irving, meanwhile, is trying to forget the sounds of betrayal he just experienced by Bert and his huge O&D team, but they manage to find a way back to each other, as they often do, in handcuffs this time, but that's neither here nor there. And while attempting to uncover the source of this mysterious and gruesome portrait that has both Irv and Dylan fearing for their safety.
Ooh.
So that is this episode. Once again, another meaty episode with a lot going on.
It's a lot, and we've reached that point where they're just gonna all have a lot now.
It's just gonna be a lot. I mean, was it ever not a lot?
I mean, that's true, but it's an intensity level now that
true.
is just amped up, and they got to keep it up there.
The deck has been stacked. Oof.
Ooh, but anyway, before we get down to a scene by scene, let's just get into these guest stars and co-stars. So we have a reappearance of Alexa the doula, played by Nikki M. James, Mr. Grainer, played by Michael Kumsky, and Gabby Arteta, who is the pregnant richest lady in baby camp, is played by Nora Dale.
And then we've got some new co-stars to acknowledge. We have Elizabeth, who's played by Rachel Addington. Sidebar, who is Elizabeth?
Yeah,
I've been
I
trying to figure
don't
that out
know.
for the
Yeah,
last
I
couple
saw these
episodes.
lists and I was like, wait a minute. I don't know who all of them are. I know who some of them
Like,
are.
who
Yeah.
is Elizabeth? The only thing I can think, but it's only discovered this past episode. I was like, is she one of the O&D people? But then no one talked. I don't know who she. I'm very confused.
Oh, yeah. No one else from OMD speaks
If
yet.
anybody listening knows who the character of Elizabeth, played by Rachel Addington, is, please let us know because we don't.
And did she come up in the last one too?
Mm-hmm.
Like she came up in credit the last time too. Yeah, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
she is.
Anyway, to continue, we have Florence, played by Antula Katsumatides, and we have Felicia, played by Claudia Robinson, the Goat Wrangler, played by Brian Rock, and Judd, good old Judd, is back with us, played by Mark Kenneth Smaltz. This episode was written by Anna Oyong Munch and Dan Erickson, and directed by Aoife McArdle. This is her second show in the can.
Two biggies back to back. Go Aoife.
All right, let's get this going.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. So just as traumatic as the ending of last episode was, so is the beginning of this episode because we pick right back up with Helly post suicide attempt or mid suicide attempt, I should say, in the elevator. She's hung herself with the extension cord. So as the floors move down, her outie awakens, right? And she's gasping for breath because she's struggling.
Golly.
Crazy. And so Helly's like flailing around. She gets down to the security check. Normally Judd is sitting right there, but he is nowhere to be found. And so the doors close and the elevator starts to go back up,
Where
right?
is Judd?
Meanwhile, Dylan is still reading Mark's book, and Mark comes in asking for Helly, and she's clearly left normal than earlier. She hasn't left in the right order. So Mark heads to the elevator, summons the elevator, and sees Helly hanging in the elevator and is like, oh crap. Meanwhile, during this time, Mr. Grainer has noticed what's going on the cameras and he's running. So it makes me think the security room must be far away because he's running and Mark before him, and Mark tries to get Helly down. Mr. Grainer helps. They put him on the floor. Mark is distraught, like, oh my God, is she okay? And Mr. Grainer pushes him in the elevator, like, go, 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 go. Makes him take the elevator down. So he's flipping out in the elevator. And then, of course, he crosses that threshold. And then his outie is just calm because he doesn't know what just happened. And when he leaves the elevator, Judd is back. We get another timestamp from the clock. That is now 5:15. The time Mark is supposed to leave normally, he's 8:15 to 5:15.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's our cold open, guys.
Okay, let's talk about this clock and the time. And where is Judd? I'm just like, what happened? Did he have to go to the bathroom? Did he get called away for some reason? Because, like,
right.
I'm thinking through it and I'm like, okay, they stagger their exit times. And from what I understood in the past, it seems like in 5-minute intervals. So if 5 o'clock is when you're done, I'm pretty sure Irv is like the first person to go because he's never there when people are hanging around late.
Yeah.
So it's like Irv 5 to 5:05. I'm going to assume it's usually Dylan 5:10 to 5 or 5:05 to 5:10.
You think it's only 5 minutes and not 15 minutes?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I feel like there was some mention of it in another episode where it seemed like it was in 5-minute intervals.
Okay.
And I think it's enough time. I mean, I might be wrong.
I don't know.
But Mark usually is out by 5:20.
Yeah.
So I'm like, they would have to be like enough time for them to get down, maybe get to their locker, get their stuff out, and get out the door.
Yeah.
Is my guess.
Yeah. I think maybe the staggering to come in doesn't necessarily reflect the staggering to come out. Maybe they can just kind of say, hey, I'm going to go now. Like if you're working at a restaurant.
I guess so.
Because there was one day where Helly was back before Mark. And then there was another day that Mark was back before Helly, actually. So I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Honestly, it hasn't made sense in a bit because I'm also like, now, this is again just an observation, but Irving is usually gone when there's still people just kind of trailing around. So again, I assume he's the first one to leave. But Irving, in one of the episodes, was the last person to arrive. The first episode where Mark finds out he's going to be chief, he's the last one in. So I'm like, doesn't that mean he works less time?
So it must change. So my assumption then maybe is, let's say you arrive, you check in at the desk, and then they call up to Judd and they say, who's here or is anyone there? Are we clear to send up? And then if it's clear, we send you up. If somebody else comes in right after, we say, hold please. And don't send them up for like 5 minutes or so. Maybe. So maybe it just kind of depends on when you arrive. Okay. And then now maybe that's so. You were the first one in today, you got to be the first one out. But maybe you were the last one in today, you got to be the last one out. I don't know.
And here's what's funny too. They definitely call when they're going in to work to make sure there's an all clear.
Yeah.
But there's no call when they leave for the same reason. You would think they'd call down to Judd's desk and be like, are we clear down in security downstairs? Okay, now we can send the next one down.
Make sure, like, hey, has the person completely left the building first? Because they're not interact. And I gotta imagine if, like, let's say you just happen to notice that, oh, whenever I'm arriving, this person is always a little bit in front of me, or I'm leaving this home. They gotta be someone who works.
Listen, if I'm curious to know who's severed and who isn't, I might show up a little early. I don't necessarily go to the reception desk. Maybe I hang around in the huge hall of Lumen when you get into the building, and I just kind of, go to the bathroom and then maybe hang out in the shadows and just see who's going to the reception desk at what time.
Yeah, maybe even stick around in your car and see, maybe you can see inside.
Who's coming
There's
out.
a lot of glass doors in the front of there. Because, like, Helly and Mark had their Audis had that exchange in the first episode where Helly was crossing the street.
Right.
Mark almost hit her with his car. So yeah, maybe it is only 5 minutes, because if they're that close together, they've got to be not staggered by that much. Maybe they need to increase how much.
Exactly. I'm just saying at this point, I feel like there should have been more run-ins than there's been, because 5 minutes is not that much time to clear a building.
Right.
And if you're really trying to make sure people don't see each other, run into each other, what have you, you'd be giving a lot more leeway. And then there's other departments. There's O&D, or maybe they have different shifts. Like maybe O&D comes in at 9 and leaves at 6.
Well, maybe they have different exits though, Rodnesha, because in Helly's
too.
Orientation, she was taken to quote unquote her stairwell. So maybe they have different entrance and exits.
Good point. But none of this explains why Judd was not at his
Judd,
post.
where were you? It seems like these are the most important times of the day, right? Arrival time and departure time. These are the times where you cannot leave your desk, sir.
Yep. And it's not like it was 5 o'clock and he was just a little bit late, like, oh, I got to my post late. You're in the middle of the shift changes.
Yeah.
So you should not be going anywhere from 5 to 5:30. You should be parked at that desk.
Yep.
I don't know where Judd went, but if we don't see him ever again after this point, I'm going to assume he got fired.
True story.
And if we do, I'm going to wonder why he didn't get fired, because that is a big faux pas to miss.
Very much so.
I guess we'll keep an eye and see. We'll start a Judd watch. If anybody sees Judd in previous or subsequent episodes, let us know, because homeboy should have lost his job that day. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, let's move on to the next sequence. Oh, so we've got Mark checking into reception. He's going in for, it's another normal day for Audi Mark, feeling no different, seeming no different. And then that transition where he goes up the elevator from like just normal blasé Mark to like panic-stricken, grief-stricken any Mark, who basically in his world has just experienced this super traumatic thing.
Yeah.
And has no semblance of time passing. He just knows, like, oh my God, like wakes right back up to those emotions. And then the doors open and he's looking on the ground, expecting to see Helly still there, like where he left her. Nope. It's Cobell and Milchek. And they're just waiting with like that mom-dad face of like, Mister, you are in trouble. And I was just like, oh, that's the last thing you want to see. So they sit Mark down. They tell him that Helly is in the hospital, that she did survive, first and foremost. So that's good news. She's in the hospital. She only suffered severe bruising, lacerations to the neck, no permanent damage. But they also tell him that she will be back at work. Mark is thinking she's done, right?
Yeah,
she's not going to come back. She's definitely, like, her Audi's definitely not going to send her back. And Ms. Cobell says Helly's Audi has no intention of quitting. And even though Mark thinks that's crazy, basically they shut him down and say, that's the end of the story. This is happening. And guess what? This happened on your watch. So kind of your fault. You got to live with that. We're out. So this is weighing on Mark a lot, as it would anyone. And he sneaks away to read another excerpt from his book before the other employees arrive. And we get a nice little montage of Mark over the subsequent days, because at this point we're going to assume Helly, I think, was probably out for a week, maybe a little more than a week. But we just see Mark morning after morning before people arrive kind of develop this ritual of reading passages from Rickon's book and trying to sneak away to read them in the bathroom whenever he can, or whatever little chances he gets, because that's the only thing that seems to be kind of keeping him going at this point. And I don't blame him. I also wish they'd shown a little more of how Dylan and Irving were dealing with Helly, over the week that passed.
Yeah.
I mean, I know eventually they do kind of posture her coming back, what they're going to do, but it would have been interesting to see how they're processing what happened, or even questioning Mark, like, did it really happen the way you're saying it happened, or are you just being over dramatic? I could see Dylan coming up with conspiracy theories of like, maybe she actually had like a hook in her back, so she wasn't really hanging from the rope and she just wanted to do it to like get people's attention. And I could see Irving having a response of like, oh, Mark, if you had just put those quotes around the office like I said, I guarantee she would be in the sweet arms of Kia right now. Like, I could see them having that kind of back and forth if they had shown it.
Yeah, what drama. This episode has the most dramatic elevator switches of any episode.
This makes me not want to go in an elevator ever.
But like, I mean, such a good job from Adam Scott now and then later on when Helly returns too. Like, we've already talked about like the subtle transitions they have to do, like when Mark was crying in his car and then like turned into happy-go-lucky, but nothing compares to this one. Like, here's another day, and now distraught, like, oh my god, Helly just tried to kill herself, what's is she okay, right. Is she okay, and then busting through. Like, that transition was just wild.
And for the characters, I would get so, now this might be the most they've experienced it to date, like maybe it hasn't been quite this incessant having these traumatic, emotional swings, but I would be sick and doggone tired. Now, granted, it's the innie that's experiencing it more than the outie, but to go from day to day, and maybe at the end of one day you feel a certain way, and then the beginning of the next day you feel another way, and then at the end of one day you do feel like super overwhelmed or traumatized or whatever, and then you've got to wake up the next day with that same trauma, and it's a new day, but it feels like the same day.
Yeah, I think it's probably more jarring when they come back feeling exactly the same way, because it makes it harder to tell the passage of time. You know what I mean? Like, they know time has passed because they know what's happening, but there's no difference. Like, the same thing when in the previous episode when Helly left with her resignation DVD and came back with the new one, she's like, oh shit. I think that's probably more jarring than when they just end the day and they're like, Mah, and they come back
right
feeling refreshed. It's a sign that they went home and they're out, he got some rest,
took care of myself,
right? Yep. Yeah. And still gotta be weird because, like Mark says in the first episode, they don't get to experience that, but they get the effects of it, right? But to leave in a state of panic and return right in that state of panic, and for you it was just an elevator ride and an elevator ride and you're still panicking, like, what? And in that moment, he's probably trying to figure out why Mr. Grainer made him leave too and not help.
And again, like, the speed with which your brain has to switch on and off in that state, because there is no wind down.
Yeah.
There is no like, oh, let me take a break or a timeout. It's like, it's a new day and she's not here and we've, cleared this area out and blah, blah, blah. And like, now you just got to calm yourself down super fast.
Right.
It's like, how?
No way to process.
How?
Right? Normally you would go home. You might even take a mental health day the next day or two if you witness someone try to take you at work. But he doesn't get to do that.
No.
He just has to come back, get right back to work. You can still got to do your job even though you just experienced this trauma.
Well, emotional roller coaster aside, we did get some Rickon quotes in this scene. Did you have any that you caught that you wanted to share?
So we get a lot of them. I didn't write down all of them, but I felt that the majority, we'll just say all but one were stupid. And there was one that was a good one.
Yeah.
So we can just read some of the silly ones. I know one of them, actually the one you noted as your favorite was also my favorite. So you want to go ahead and read that one and then I'll read the other ones.
All right, guys, a little Rickonism for you. Here we go. What separates man from machine is that machines cannot think for themselves. Also, they are made of metal, whereas man is made of skin.
It's like, just in case you were worried that I thought that was the only thing that makes us different from machines, let me just clarify by saying I also know that they're metal and we're made of skin. Like, what?
Didn't need to state it. Didn't need to say it.
It's so ridiculous. It would have been maybe a decent quote without that.
Right?
But yeah, some of the other ones were, a society with festering workers cannot flourish, just as a man with rotting toes cannot skip. Bro, what?
I mean, is that untrue? Can he not?
I mean, yeah, you can't skip, but I don't know that I would. It's a bad analogy, right? Like, I don't know that I would equate skipping with flourishing.
In Rickon's mind,
a man with rotting toes cannot flourish. Or I don't know.
Maybe Rickon is the type of man who, when he's extremely happy and in a good mood, he finds himself skipping everywhere. And in his mind, it's like, that is the epitome, that is the ultimate sign of flourishing. If you just feel like you can't walk, you can't run, you gotta skip, then you are thriving.
You are a grown man skipping. You are living your best life. Oh man, that's a
And
mess.
by God, if my toes rotted off and I couldn't skip, I couldn't imagine a world like, I don't know. But
Goodness.
oh, what else we got?
And so we also have bullies are nothing but bull and lies. What? Okay, so here we go back to like the acrostic poem. Okay, broke up the word bullies. Okay, and then another one. They cannot crucify you if your hand is in a fist.
That
I'm
one,
pretty sure
yeah.
they could just put the nail somewhere else, Rickon.
And the funny thing about that is technically actual crucifixion happens through the wrist.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if your hand's in a fist or not.
I thought I had the same thought. I was like, isn't it the wrist?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So we have this lovely montage of Mark hearing these quotes as Mark is reading at different times of the day, different days throughout Helly being gone. And the last one is probably the only one that is helpful. Mark finds all of them helpful.
Yes.
He's riveted, but this is the only one that
He's soaking it
I think makes sense for Mark's situation. And it's, should you find yourself contorting to fit a system, dear reader, stop and ask if it's truly you that must change or the system. That was a decent quote, Rickon.
Listen, a broken clock is right twice a day. You know?
Yeah.
Every now and again, you get those little gems from Rickon where you're like, oh, okay.
Okay. That one worked.
That was pretty good. Then you go back to bull and lies, and you're like, well, okay, you lost me. You lost me.
Oh, but I did want to say something else too. I forgot. We got into the quotes, but I did have another reaction, and that was just like, why is Mark to blame? I felt so bad for Mark when they were trying to pit the blame on him. This happened under your watch. And I'm just like, there's only so much you can do. And also, they only allow him to do so much. Like the thing he tried to do a couple episodes back in perpetuity was trying to be helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to take her there to help. And Cobell wouldn't even let him do that. He had to sneak and do that. So, like, how? What? How? How is it Mark's fault?
I don't know what they expected Mark to be able to do to mitigate this in any way. This man tried. Okay, he talked to her, he pulled her aside, tried to give her some things to hang on, tried to get her to work, like, tried to inspire her. Like, we've tried every method, every which way. It ain't happening. Y'all even tried to torture her tail into submission, and it didn't work. And my thing, too, is, like, seeing all of that happening, knowing that she's not getting on board, why didn't you go to her outie self and say, listen, we need you to make a video or do something that, like, gets your innie on board. Clearly, she needs some extra attention. Make her feel special. I don't care what you got to do, but the only way this is going to work is if she hears it from you. Because clearly that was the only person she wanted to hear from.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. But what I do know is that it's not Mark's fault.
It's not Mark's fault. Mark, it is not your fault, okay?
I need you to hear me, Mark. It's not.
You do not need to own that. You don't need to hold on to that. Let it go, all right? Well, speaking of letting things go, we get into the next sequence where Grainer gets a report to Cobell. They diagnose Petey's chip, and he uses the phrase that there was full synaptic coupling, and that this confirms that Petey was indeed reintegrated as Cobell had theorized, so she gets the privilege of saying she was right. And Grainer even says, you were right, and, you know, give yourself a pat on the back. This doesn't seem to be enough for Cobell to know that. And then they have a nice little discussion about, how do you think this is going to go over with the board? Grainer's like, I mean, I don't think they're going to take this very well after the Helly incident. And then Cobell just kind of sits there like, yep. Helly thing, yep, definitely know about that. And he looks at her like, you didn't tell them. And she's like, I'm getting all my ducks in a row. Don't antagonize me. Like, she pushes back real quick. And again, this is where you kind of see that kind of personalization of their relationship. Like, Grainer just seems like, dude, come on, you are going to mess this up if you try to, like, reach for too much. How do you see this going? Like, what's your plan? What's the plan? So Cobell basically says, look, I want all the facts. I want to deliver everything to the board at one time. So what I need you to do is find out who did this, who made it possible for the reintegration to happen. That's your job. And she leaves him with that. And then the next thing we see is that Mark's heading to the cabin. So he's leaving work, gets to his locker, sees his phone, has blown up with messages from Rickon. And I love the voicemails Rickon leaves for Mark, too. I didn't write any of them down, but I remember some of them. He's like, hi, if this is Lumen Mark, Inside Mark, if you could pass a message along to my Mark, and let him know that we're at the birthing camp. Like, just
The messages just like make it very clear that he still doesn't really fully grasp what
it's
severance
like, I'm not
is.
sure
And
if you're asleep or awake or whatever. Like, he just, yeah, does
right.
not.
And it's like, in the episode where he and Devin drop off his book at Mark's house, he's like, "Oh, I hope he gets home early." And Devin's just like, that's not gonna happen. Like, what do you? And so this kind of like
Oh,
calls back to that, where it's like you really don't have any understanding of what
no,
goes on
no,
here. It's just like,
not at all.
I'm wondering if they're gonna give you these messages early or and then he's like, if you are lost, and it's like, bro, any call that you give him before his
Before
workday is over,
5:30 p.m., he's not getting it.
he's not getting them. So
Oh
funny.
boy, that was funny. But anyway, he speeds himself along over to the birthing cabin. Doesn't want to miss the birth of his niece, so he heads straight there. And before he heads inside, he sees Alexa. So she's there trying to help, Devin with her labor. And she comes outside. They have an awkward exchange. But once again, it seems like she's still kind of like, maybe, maybe. And I gotta say, I don't get it. I don't
Yeah.
understand why she would even, like, I would see him, I'd be cordial, be like, hey Mark, just to give you a, basically be the midwife that you're there to be. You're probably just arriving. I don't know if you've gotten any details, but here's what's going on with Devin. She's this, she's this. Right now she's kind of just resting. Rickon's crying. It's weird. I'm gonna go take a walk and you guys can catch up. See ya. But she's over here like having these longing looks like, things could have worked, but man, you got real weird with those kids at the
And it's just like, girl, your entire date was terrible.
It was. It was.
Like,
I feel like she is missing crucial elements that led up to that
yeah,
point.
all the warning signs. But I mean, to each their own, I guess. But yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about Grainer and Cobell some more. Grainer Grainer seems to question Harmony's decisions quite a bit.
Yeah.
But he doesn't snitch. And I feel like he easily could if he really was worried that she was like going off the rails. But he doesn't. And I'm just like, why does he like keep her secrets? I mean, especially with the Helly incident and knowing if a severed worker had a situation like that. Because we already saw in the news about the pregnant severed worker and the PR crisis that you know, unfurled. If it got out that a Lumen employee tried to commit suicide at work while severed, you would think you would want to get that information on the board so they could get ahead of something like that.
Yeah.
Or at least try to, like, you know, co-opt the story, and you know, just in case. Because I don't know. Anyway, it just makes me wonder. Like, I'm surprised that he didn't just go around her to be like, all right, you guys, this happened, and you probably should know.
It again makes it seem like, okay, what thing has he done in the past, or what thing has Harmony done for him in the past that he's like indebted to her?
Right. I don't know.
There's a level of loyalty there that we don't know how she earned, because it's not out of fear of her.
Right. No, absolutely not. But he's staying quiet. He's just like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my other question that I had while watching the scene. So in the pilot script, we talked about the story arc for Devin, and that essentially they let it be known that Devin is the one who owns the home that Rickon and her stay in, and that it seems like she's kind of the breadwinner in the couple situation. And I'm still kind of holding on to that as canon until proven otherwise.
Right.
And so then that makes me wonder, what does Devin do to be able to afford this birthing center? And I love how she's up in this private birthing center cabin, and she's over here talking about the rich lady over here. And I'm like, lady, you rich.
Well, yeah, it makes me think, because one of the many voicemails that Rickon left, Mark said, if you're lost, we're in one of the more affordable birthing cabins at the very end of whatever, row 6 or something. So it makes me think that they are possibly, because of Rickon, keeping up with the Joneses type of situation, where maybe they're middle class and they scrimp to do some things that are maybe out of their price range, because for Rickon it's all about an illusion. And it's kind of like she's comparing herself to the rich birthing center, and when we get to the richest lady in baby camp, her birthing center is definitely more intense than Devin and Rickon's. However, to someone who is of lower socioeconomic status, we'd be like, all of y'all are rich, so what are you talking about?
Exactly.
So I'm not sure. I really can't call it, and we won't know because she's on maternity leave.
I don't know if they'll ever reveal it, but I just found it ironic that she's over here talking
Yeah.
about the lady next door, and I'm like, lady, let's talk about you. Like,
I mean, the biggest plot twist would be if we get confirmation that Rickon's books actually are bestsellers and it is just all Rickon, but I just can't
hmm.
imagine that.
Oh boy, I guess let's move on.
Okay, so after the exchange with Alexa outside, Mark goes in and Devin tells him about this expensive cabin next door. Like, oh, did you see did you pass the other one on your way in? They must be crazy rich. And Rickon starts doing this ritual. Well, first of all, when Mark comes in, he's crying over the baby.
Yes, yes.
Lord, and he's just like, I just don't want to pick up my father, crying, and it's
And Devin's like, I
ridiculous.
know, they're there. Like, she's over here trying to console this man while she's in
Yeah, she's
labor.
like, yeah, you supposed to be helping me. I'm the one in labor. And so Rickon reveals, you got to share a secret. It helps clear the air and makes a void so that the birthing process is sped up. Mark's like, is that something we want? He's like, yeah. And so he's trying to say something. And so Rickon's like, I'll share a secret. You don't have one, don't worry, I'll share one. And he's like, I am a little hurt that you have not thanked me for receiving the book yet. And so Mark reveals that, like, I didn't get no book. There wasn't a book. And he's like, we left it on your doorstep. So he's like, I don't know, it must have been stolen. And Rickon freaks out because he's like, that was an advance copy. Oh no. Like, don't let my secrets out, I guess. It's not ready.
Oh,
so they're having this back and forth. They're having this exchange. Devin's contraction passes, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get coffee. I can't handle this. Whatever this is right now, I'm gonna go." So she sets out to go try to find coffee from someone else in another cabin. And Rickon's like, "Here, Mark, you can help me hang the kelp. Just another weird thing that has nothing to do with giving birth.
oh
That Rick."
gosh.
Gonna help his wife deliver more ideally, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, Devin sees someone coming out of the rich cabin and tries to flag them down, and he's kind of dressed like an old-fashioned milkman, like he's all white. I think he has a hat on, but he's clearly like some servant of some kind. He doesn't hear her. So then she looks into the window and she sees another beautiful pregnant lady pouring herself a cup of coffee, and like a creeper, she stands there and watches her until she gets her attention.
Like
like,
the businessman.
can I get some coffee? And the lady is like bewildered, but she's like, I guess you can come in. She lets her come in. The woman's name is Gabby, and they have a brief conversation while she's pouring herself some coffee. And she asks Devin if this is her first kid, and Gabby informs her that this is her third kid, and she's going to be naming him William. And Devin asks her, how do you handle 3 kids? I'm so afraid of messing one kid up. And Gabby says, a lot of help, I guess. And she looks genuinely confused, or like she really seems like she's searching her brain for how to answer the question,
Right.
which should come up later. And then Devin asks Gabby if she's rich. She's like, wow, this place, are you rich? And Gabby looks just as confused. And it's partially a look of like, that's a rude question, but also kind of like,
Right.
he doesn't know how to answer that either. Like the other question, she's not really sure. And she just laughs, and then Devin leaves with her cup of coffee.
Okay. So, first thing I want to address, because the first time I watched this and we got to the scene with the kelp hanging, and I was just like, what is this? This has to mean something. And I think I looked it up the first time too because it was just the weirdest thing. I was like, Rickon does a lot of weird things, but this one's pretty dang weird. And the fact that they don't explain it. And even when he says to Mark, like, do you really want me to explain it? Mark's
right.
like, no. And so I was like, there has to be a root cause for it. When I looked the first time, I could not find anything. I'm all like, seaweed, giving birth, seaweed help, kelps for birth, kelping, is that a thing in birth? I like looked up all these terms, could not find anything. This time I looked it up again and I did find something.
Oh, interesting.
So there is a thing called laminaria. This is what it is, and this is how I think it correlates. It's wild. So it says laminaria. These are special seaweed sticks that are inserted into your cervix to absorb moisture, which makes them get thicker and expand, thus opening up the cervix. According to the Harvard Medical School Family Health Guide, laminaria dilators are softer and less likely to injure the uterus as compared to the original method of dilating the cervix by using metal rods. These seaweed sticks will absorb any water or moisture and expand up to 2 or 3 times their usual size. or to a diameter of 1/2 inch in 4 to 6 hours, which will gently open up the cervix and therefore speed up the process of labor. So my thought is, Rickon probably heard somewhere about something about that, because it seems like an Eastern medicine thing. The site I found it on was like a holistic site for Asian parents. And he probably heard something loosely about seaweed and cervixes and labor.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, I'll get some kelp and hang it all over the room.
Right. Yeah. He probably got half the story, thought he knew what he was doing because he's Rickon, and then just ran with it and didn't confirm anything, like a dummy.
So that is your science lesson for today, guys. The other thing, I had a lot of pregnancy questions. The other thing was about the coffee. I don't know if you were wondering about that, but as soon as she said, like, I got to get coffee, I was like, I'm pretty sure they advise against coffee to people who are pregnant. Now, I didn't know if it was like a hard no, like it is with like processed meats and like certain cheeses and stuff like that, or if it was just like we don't advise. So I did look that up as well. It seems like for the most part, people are like, we prefer you don't drink coffee, but if you do, no more than 2 6-ounce cups of coffee in a day.
Yeah. No,
and they
more than 200 milligrams of caffeine a day. So that's what's in about 2 cups of coffee.
True. So yeah, there were a lot of birthing things that I was just like, I need answers. And I mean, she only had 1 cup from what we saw, so I was like, I guess she's following the rules.
I can tell you this much. I was told, go ahead and have your coffee, just keep it under 2 cups. And that has saved me because I'm a coffee drinker and I will get a caffeine headache. And I tried to cut back prior to trying to conceive, and that was not a thing. So I have 1 a day, and if I need to, I'll have another. I could have a.
Got it.
But I've been having 6 ounces.
Did you have anything else for this section?
Just another Rickon what the WTF moment, crying over the baby.
Oh, what? I should have looked that up, or if there's something to that too.
There's probably nothing like that. That's like, I mean, the kelp is even a stretch, right? There's the kelp thing, but he got the kelp totally wrong. So there's probably nothing for crying or purging the secrets to clear the bad energy and make a void for the baby. What?
Oh gosh, I don't know what that.
I don't know, because if anything, what he was talking about, what was making him cry about not wanting to turn into his dad, if anything, that seems to me that you're just emoting all this bad energy.
True. That's true.
Like, say well wishes, say your hopes and dreams for this child's life. Maybe that makes more sense.
If he were in there crying and he was like, I just can't wait for you to get here, I've been dreaming about you. If it were like that, I get, because like you said, then it's like tears of joy and expectation or whatever. But it's like, I don't want to be a terrible dad. It's like, well, okay. Now your kid's just like, oh, should I be worried? Do I really want you as my father? Like, do I want to come out?
That's fine.
Anyway, so as we said, Devin heads back to the cabin. Rickon's still wondering about this book. He's thinking, you know what? Actually, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe my book being stolen will be a gift to the thief and make them better, and they'll turn and change their ways. And Mark's just like, sure. And as he's pondering and thinking through that, then he also brings up the fact that him and Devin wanted to do a middle name tribute to Mark's wife by naming her Gemma, the middle name Gemma, and that Mark was not okay with it, and seems like Rickon's kind of lamenting that fact, but he's like, but I understand, I guess, you weren't comfortable with it, And I'm like, why are you lambasting him? Like, that's a very reasonable thing to not want. Now, it'd be one thing if this were like a mutual family member between Mark and Devin felt like that's how she wanted to honor them, and Mark had a problem. But it's like, but this is Mark's wife. Yeah. She loosely has a connection to you guys, but really that's his wife. And like, you already see he's not handling her passing very well. So why would he want to look at a child that I'm sure he wants to look at with joy and know that that child is carrying his dead wife's name? And he even says, like, I think your baby deserves better than to have a name with a bunch of feely baggage attached to it.
Right.
And I agree.
Yeah, I agree with him too. Like, pick another name. And this is clearly a conversation that has already been had too, because like, I know you're not okay. So why are you bringing it up?
Why
like, again, Rickon's just a dick, just like he brought the fact that he was severed at his not dinner party.
Right?
Yeah.
He definitely prods for sure. He doesn't know where the line is. And it's like, for someone who's trying to make this cabin like good vibes only, you sure are doing a lot of bringing up a bunch of like drudgery in the past. What is happening?
Vibes are all wrong from Rickon.
They're all wrong. That's why this baby's taking so long. She's like, I don't know. I don't know. So Devin returns with her coffee. She tells the boys that she met the richest lady in baby camp. Her and Mark have a little aside where they share coffee and talk. And then she brings up, well, first she brings up baby lady Gabby. And she's like, she's very pretty. And Mark's like, I'm pretty sure she's spoken for. And
Right.
so,
Like, you're so desperate for me to start dating again that you're going to hook up
right?
with someone who is actively giving birth
We up
right
with a
now.
pregnant lady. Not to mention, she already heard the lady say this is her third.
Right.
What?
He's ridiculous. She basically is like, I approve of you being a home wrecker if that's what's going to make you happy.
If that's going to get you out of this funk, Mark, then go ahead and wreck a home.
Go do it.
And then she brings up Alexa to Mark, like, I think she'd give you another shot. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And Mark's basically like, she'd be crazy to give me another shot. Like, even he realizes, like, I am a trash can dumpster fire. She should not give me another chance.
He's like, I don't know what she told you, how she told you our date went, but no. She should not give me another chance.
Which I appreciate that he, if nothing else, has self-awareness to a degree.
Right.
And so it seems like while they're talking to one another, that Mark begins to, well, first Devin has a contraction, and then he kind of plays into the secret sharing thing, even though Rick is not there. Mm-hmm. And Devin's like, you don't have to do it. And he's like, no, I have one. I want to share. And then he says, I think Lumen is up to no good. And then he starts to talk about the businessman. But unfortunately, Devin goes into high alert labor, and it's like, oh, I think this baby's coming. Go get the doula, midwife, and we'll talk about this another time. So that cuts that short.
I was just so disappointed that he didn't get a chance to say it to somebody.
I know.
He was so close, and she was like,
of a show.
She really, I mean, how could you predict what he was about to say? But she really was nowhere even close with her guests. Like, she was like, what, you mean they're like messing up your paychecks or something? Like, he's like, well, no, it's a little bit more than that, I think. Do you remember the businessman? And then she goes into labor. So poor thing.
If only.
So we get back to Lumen, and Helly is about to have her first day back since the last time she was conscious, right? So remember, the last time her was conscious, she jumped off that trash can. She tried to hang herself. So Milchek is coaching Mark on how to receive Helly, which, first of all, if they've said that he's effed up this hard, why are they giving him this responsibility? But he's like, you need to have kind eyes when she comes in. You need to greet her with kind eyes. Can you do kind eyes? And Mark does this weird and Milchek's face is like, oh God, we're gonna be in trouble. And this silent
she's gonna try to quit again.
The facial expressions back and forth is just so hilarious. So then Milchek takes Mark to the elevator. He gets a confirmation on the walkie that Helly's coming up, and he leaves for Mark to greet Helly alone. And so Helly comes up out of the elevator, and she is gasping for air because that's the last thing she felt. And then she's looking around and she's realizing once again, like, oh, it didn't work. God, I'm back here. And then she looks up at Mark, and Mark is trying to do those kind eyes. And he looks psychotic. He looks like so terrified.
Truly just like, and he even tries to eyebrow where he's like, I'm kind.
And it's like,
and the funniest thing is the way Helly's face just instantly deflates, like, oh, what the hell? Like, this is how you want to win me back?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, it's terrible.
Oh my gosh.
My goodness. So then we get back to Mark and Helly in the kitchenette. The time is noted 9:25, so maybe they've made Helly come in late, especially that day, so Mark can especially greet her. I don't know. But Mark is kind of giving her a reorientation, tells her that all the dangerous items have been locked away for her safety. And he says, and maybe, we can take it easy for a while. Maybe you can just focus on the happy numbers for a while. And Helly just laughs hysterically, like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, oh, I just tried to kill myself. You think focusing on the happy numbers, you think the problem was only
happy numbers is going to take that away,
right? Yeah. You think the problem here, the only issue here was the scary numbers. Okay, sir. And so Mark is just, like, wants to talk to her and is like, well, do you want to talk about it? And she's just like, no, Mark, I don't want to talk about it. And at this point, we know, as the viewers, we know that Mark has started to go through a change during this time that Helly was gone, but Helly doesn't know it because for her no time has passed.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Irving and Dylan are in the main part of MDR trying to debate what will bring Helly back around, or what's going to help this transition back? And Irving thinks, let's hide inspirational quotes around for her to find. And Dylan's like, no, she needs the perks. It's because she hasn't gotten any perks yet. I would kill myself if I hadn't gotten any perks.
Which I was just like, oh my gosh, no, not the time. Not the
I think a
time.
finger trap would have kept her from trying to take her own life. Wildly disconnected from the situation, Dylan, I think. I mean,
Mhm.
Irving is too in a way, but like he's a little more closer than I think.
I mean, he's at least trying to speak to her state of
Right.
mind, you know? It's not the solution, but he's at least like, well, I mean, clearly she's not feeling well mentally, so maybe something inspirational will help her state of mind.
Right.
And Dylan's like, she just needs to win some stuff. Like,
But so Helly and Mark rejoin the group, and Mark decides it's a time he wants to try to sneak away and read the book some more. And then Miss Casey from the Wellness Center appears and says that she's there to observe Helly to look for signs of sadness. Dylan is like, oh, here comes Miss Casey. She's super hot. I'm gonna shoot my shot. And he hits on her a
mm,
bunch. And it's
hard.
hilarious. And then
Hard.
yeah, Miss Casey then sits by Helly's desk and like right behind her, and she's watching her as Helly's leaning forward, just zoned out, picking at her eyelashes. And then Miss Casey's like scribbling away in her notebook, and she's like, "Oh, did you get all that?" And Helly's like, "What is that a sign of sadness?" And Miss Casey reminds her of the rules that if you're feeling feelings of sadness, you can request a hug. And Helly's just like, I do not want a hug from someone I don't know. That's not going to make me feel better. Just leave me alone, kind of thing. She's just like, no, I don't want a hug. And Dylan tries to get a hug. No.
The funny thing too, for all Miss Casey's kind of robotic nature, the minute Dylan tries to go in for stuff, she's just like, absolutely not. Like she knows enough to be like, no, I don't want it.
Right. And it almost makes me think, I don't know if she realizes how robotic she's coming off. I just think she's coming off across as soothing, and what her soothing,
mm-hmm.
voice is like really robotic. Or her reciting
Mm-hmm.
calmly is really robotic, but I don't know that she notices it.
I'm sure she doesn't.
It's a little more like humanistic when she has a different reaction, because she can't react to that calmly. She's got to be a little more curt with him to like get the picture across. So it's the more human moments when she does turn Dylan down.
Right. Well, see, that's my one, because there was a theory going around for a while about Miss Casey being a robot. A lot of people thought that she was maybe AI or something like that, and that's part of the Lumen tech that they were developing. And my argument against that is the fact that she shoots Dylan down every time. Like, clearly
Right.
she's not just on autopilot programming. She's like, no. No to you. No,
Right.
never.
And
Not today. Not ever. Like,
for a robot, I think she would cite a Lumen rule for shooting him down, like a reason,
true.
and
True.
she's just like, no, like it's
She
not
just
for you.
flat out.
No.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. I think one of the times she doesn't even respond to him. She just keeps walking.
Right? She's like, I don't have time for this. Like, she treats him like a cat caller on the street.
I mean, in essence, he kind of is.
Yeah,
Like,
it's true. Dylan being Dylan at this point, because he's alluded to all these things he thinks his outie is. So he's like, oh, here's my
listen, this
chance.
is the man
Like
who
my outie.
potentially makes love to various MILFs in his community.
Right?
Okay. I don't think this is going to slow him down. He's like, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow,
Yeah.
but one day.
It's so funny. But anyway, so Irv then at this point starts to have another one of his visions of black goo. And it's this time it's more intense. It's raining from the ceiling. He looks over at Mark, and Mark is like, are you okay, buddy? And it's oozing out of Mark's eyeball.
Mm.
It's intense. And this poor Irv, he just gets so frightened by these things. And so once he's jarred back to reality, he's like, I must go to O&D to seek Bert's counsel. um, so Mark's like, really, right now? Like, we just started the work day. Well, if you're gonna go again, make a copy of the map, so if we need to find you, we can come. So he takes the copy of the map that Bert has left for him in his tote, and he goes to print 2 copies. And out of the printer comes this gruesome art piece for which the episode is titled The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. And Milchick appears out of nowhere and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That was sent to this printer by mistake. You weren't supposed to see it. It was a joke from Miss Cobell." And Dylan now has come over, so he's seen the painting. And then Irv tells Dylan that Bert lied about their department size, which is really 8 people. And this, along with this painting, sends Dylan into a tailspin. And to give you specifics about the painting, it depicts members of O&D, not people that we know currently, but people wearing the badges that O&D wears, brutally massacring people that are wearing the MDR badges. So yeah, I'm sure Dylan's like, this has confirmed everything I've been saying about O&D.
Dylan takes this information and runs with it. This is like what I imagine any conspiracy theorist would do if they found out even one of their conspiracy theories was right. Then they're like, I was right about everything. And it's just like, whoa, slow your roll. Okay, it's a painting. We don't really know what's going on. Oh, I know what's going on. Like, he takes this fuel and lights a forest fire. He's like, they're going to gut us. We're not trusting them anymore. They're not coming over here. I'm going to get a shank. Like, he's just like full on ready to go into Rambo mode against any O&D infiltration. Like, he's not for it.
Yeah, it's a mess. But we have a lot to say about this one. So you want to take it from, yes. We talked about Condi's already. We want to talk about the goo. But before the goo, the signs of sadness that Miss Casey is supposed to be monitoring Helly for. I'm just like, her every move is a sign of sadness because she does not want to be there. What are you supposed to do? Like, what are you there to do other than to confirm if she's sad or not? And if she says she's not sad, then what? Just keep watching?
I'm wondering if there's a list that Cobell gave her of like things to watch out for. Like, does she try to sneak items into her pockets? Does she disappear for long periods of time? Does she, ever pinch herself or hit herself? Like, I feel like it's probably that there's like a checklist or something that is, quote, signs of sadness that she's looking to see if they're happening or not. And then unless she says she's sad, she's just going to be looking out for those particular signs rather than looking at this woman and realizing, yeah, she's sad. Yeah, she's sad and there's nothing you guys can do about it.
Right. She needs to go to a real therapist.
She needs to go home.
Yes, right. She needs to go to a real therapist on the outside and have access to these inside memories while she's there, because this is the trauma she needs to process.
So let's talk about this goo. First off, I just need them to just explain this already, because every time I see it, I'm like, what is the goo? And again, we see it every week in the credit sequence.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this an indication of? And then I had a thought, but I don't know that it is correct. Is the goo like when he saw it leaking from Mark's eye? I'm like, is this maybe his way of feeling like a sense of, as we talked about in the previous episode, reintegration? Like, is the goo some semblance of the chip not working or having a leak, or like the matrix, unraveling around him? And like the goo is kind of like everything is just kind of meshing together in his brain and like leaking. One thing is leaking from one to the other.
Yeah, I don't know what my explanations for the goo would be. It made me, the second time happening after the conversation with Bert in the last episode, made me think, oh, is this the chip again also communicating something to him? How Bert has said here finds other ways. I don't know what it's going to know, but maybe, like you said, maybe it's communicating that there's something wrong. We still don't really know if this is how scary numbers manifest to him too. But I do think this is a very interesting storytelling choice on the part of the directors, because they don't ever truly confirm if this is Irv sleeping or like quote unquote daydreaming. Like, we had that conversation happen. Like, is he fully asleep, or is this he's just like daydreaming this, or is he actually fully asleep? Because we never get an outside POV. And I think maybe traditional storytelling would have an insert shot of someone looking over at Irv's desk and seeing him like sitting upright with his eyes closed, like nodding off. But we don't get that. So it just keeps us kind of questioning about that. And I think that's really interesting. It's weird. I really like that because like, we did have different assumptions of what exactly was happening there. Our takes were different. I was like, well, they talked about dozing, so he must be asleep. And you're like, oh, is he fully asleep? Or is he, we don't know. So it's just, I mean, another layer of confusing to a very confusing show already. But it's interesting. We only ever see the reactions after the fact, which is like, hey, you're back with us, which again could be a reaction to someone being deep into sleep or someone just zoning out.
I had a thought.
Mm-hmm.
What if Irving is one of those people who can sleep with their eyes open?
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, there are people who do that. Yeah, yeah, that might be what's happening.
And then I thought about the episode last week with the Metallica song and the sleeping with one eye open. And I'm like, what if maybe that's the confusion, is because he is able to sleep with his eyes open, so people don't know until they realize, like, wait, he's not answering, or he's just staring off, or whatever.
Right, right.
Maybe not.
I don't know.
Just a thought.
So, as promised earlier, much like Rodnesha got to have her band nerd geek out about the music in an earlier episode, I'm going to geek out about this painting a little bit, guys.
I'm ready to learn.
Up until this point, I have not liked any of the paintings they've shown. They've just been weird. But this one, it's a really scary painting. I thought it was a very stunning painting. And so I mentioned earlier Francisco Goya, who was a famous Spanish painter, and this painting in particular is very much in the style, or that's at least the paintings that I have thought of, and I'm gonna list some off, and maybe you guys can look them up, or we can put them in show notes or something to reference. But the 3rd of May 1808 is a painting by Francisco Goya where there's people at the firing squad about to die. It's at night, it's very dark, there's very high contrast of light and dark, and light shining onto the key points of the painting. You're gonna look it up.
I sure am.
Look it up. The color scheme is different, but again, going back to romanticism, it's very much the same style where romanticism uses contrasts of lights and darks and different colors to convey like strong emotions, and very like they it's like a genre of scenes, like they display something happening. So whether they're real in time or they're based on mythical stuff, a lot of painters painted like historic events, and so this one is one. So the comparison, right, the grim barbarity of optics and design, it's depicting like a historic event that has happened, and it's a very dramatic painting. Another one of Francisco Goya's paintings that this kind of reminds me of is called
Oh, I've seen this one.
Yes, and it's the giant monster Saturn literally biting the head off of a tiny human. And in this painting, this O&D painting, we're seeing people grab people and stab them. We're seeing someone like cannibalize another person in this painting, and there's so much going on in this painting. Also, as far as using colors to convey strong emotion, most of this painting is black. The background is fully black. It's very dark blacks and browns, and then all of the highlighted moments are all, aside from their badges, the department badges, so that you know which department is devouring what other department. It's all reds and oranges. It's fire. It's hellish. It's very it's Jewing, like I said earlier. They're all are trying to convey strong emotion, because they're all of the paintings up until now have depicted a scene from Kier's life, and they're trying to evoke some kind of emotion for you to be inspired by Kier's life. But this one does the best job, and it's not about Kier. What does that mean? At like very clearly makes Irving immediately question his relationship with Bert, and it immediately makes Dylan more scared of O&D than he already is.
Irving's first reaction, even looking at it, he recoils.
Yeah.
Like he has to look away, because he's just like, oh God. Which I imagine for his innie self, he's never seen anything that violent.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
So to see that and see it be about potentially people in the office, his haven, his temple, it's just like, no.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking at this Saturn picture. I've seen this one before. It's so weird. Every time I see it, I'm just like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I didn't know what it was called. And I never knew what was happening in it. I was just like, why is this giant man eating a torso of another smaller person? And what is happening? And sidebar, I have illegal photos of these paintings, because I did get to see these while I was in Spain, and they were in a room where you were not supposed to take photos. But I had my backpack. I was going to say, why are they legal? That's why.
My backpack on my front, and there was like a bunch of different seats, and these paintings are massive, by the way. So they're paintings you have to like, you can sit down in front of one but at least for me, and then I move to another angle and I look at it from a different angle. I'll stand across the room and look at it, and then I get up really close and look at it. Like there's a lot going on in these paintings, not just from like a skill point of view of like looking at like brush strokes and stuff, but like actually what is happening in the photo in the painting. There's a lot going on, and again, another parallel to this O&D painting. There's a lot going on in this painting.
That first one you mentioned,
The
the
3rd of
3rd of
May.
May, what was it called?
Yeah,
Yeah,
3rd of May.
definitely has similar styling. The way the light's hitting, the way the faces are responding and reacting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one I could definitely see a close parallel to the Grim Barbarity painting, which is interesting. I don't know what I thought the style was for paintings like that. I definitely, like I told you earlier, didn't think it was romantic. I'm thinking like these are like scary portraits or historical portraits or whatever. But then, of course, the Saturn one is the historical. So I was just like, I don't know why someone wants to paint that stuff. I mean, it definitely evokes an emotion, which is just like, that is terrifying. But now I'll be able to look at those in a different light. I don't think I've ever really looked at the work of Francisco Goya. I know I've heard of him as an artist, but I did not know what he was famous for or
Yeah,
what style he was into.
if
So
you get to go back to Madrid, you went to Madrid when you went to Spain, right?
hmm
Yeah.
hmm
There's a whole Goya room in that's permanently there at the Prado Museum.
I wanted to do museums, but
The friend you were with is
see,
not into museums.
they were not into museums, which is fine. Everybody has their vacation thing, but I do like a good museum. I do like to learn and see. Well, thank you for this little enlightening, get it? Light,
But
lightning art moment. I will definitely be looking more into that, and hopefully you guys will be too. And now I'll be paying a little more attention too to any other portraits we get going forward from Objects in Design or wherever we see them, just to kind of see where the influence is for them or if any stylistic changes. I wonder if any of them have different styles or are informed by different art eras.
yeah,
If we
I'm
see
not
going
sure.
forward, like
Maybe,
are all of them?
yeah, or maybe even I think up until this point too, we've only gotten Kier paintings, right? But I don't know if we'll get any paintings about other Egans in the history of Lumen, and maybe
True.
style changes across different people. I do know that they're playing with light and dark in some of the other paintings too, like the youthful convalescence. I keep going back to that. That's the most recent one we've seen. In that painting, it's a very dark bedroom, and everyone who is around Kier is dark and not very detailed, but Kier in the bed, sickly
Kier is
like
illuminated.
all white, and he's illuminated, and the focus is there, and he looks pitiful. Like there's more detail on his face than anything else.
Even the one where we see Kier on the cliff where
Yes.
Irving and Bert are like, he could slip. And I was like, that wasn't what I thought, but okay. But even that, like, that one wasn't quite so much darkness and illumination. That one had a little more illumination over the valley and him. So it seemed like the light was illuminating from him, because I think from what I recall, like his back and everything behind him is in shadow, and then the valley before him is illuminated.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Art watch, guys. Art watch. We'll start that.
So Radisha got you on the music. I've got you on the art.
We'll see what else comes up. I mean, there might be other things. There is definitely, speaking of the music, there's definitely an episode coming up that I can't wait to talk about, and there will be music, and it will be amazing. Okay, going forward. So we're back with Cobell and Milchek. This is right after the Grim Barbarity printer incident, mistake, joke, ha ha ha, which, what kind of joke? Anyway, and so Milchek comes back to the office. He sees Cobell standing there. She's just kind of looking at him, and she's just like, you ran a 266 on Irving B. And Milchek's like, well, I was hoping it would dissuade him from continuing to fraternize with Bert G. And he was like, should I have consulted you? And she's like, no. Like, takes this long moment to decide, am I mad at you or not?
Right.
Do I appreciate you going around me to try to, check these fools?
Yeah.
And she ultimately chalks it up to him showing good initiative and just lets it slide. But it does bring up an interesting point, which is that, he did kind of take the reins to do this 266, which I'm like, is this from the Book of Gaslighting? Do y'all have like rule codes? I'm like, here's how you gaslight number 266.
Right.
Print a weird painting of a false historical event to confuse everybody, or I don't know.
It also lets you know that what we assumed already is that they're watching everything. It's like they're really watching everything. Like they know that Bert and Irving have been having this relationship.
Right. Even though we haven't seen them watching them, clearly nothing gets past them.
He's like, oh man, I'm already trying to go back in O&D. Let me do something to stop it.
It's interesting that they decided to pull that stunt now.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's definitely been plenty of lead ups before, and I wonder why they let it slide all the times that Bert and Irving were going back and forth to see each other.
Right.
And now's when they decide, like, okay, time to shut this down. So you would have thought that one of the first few incidences, they would have been like, all right, you guys can't go to other departments. You're not allowed to even know where those departments are. Clearly someone's making maps. Like, it's restricted now. Dunzo, you're done. But anyway, that doesn't happen. So he tries to instead scare him with a possible coup, which worked for sure for Dylan. I think Irving's still trying to parse it out in his brain.
Yeah.
And so the next thing they discuss is the fact that Miss Casey is in MDR. And Milchick's like, hey, I see that Miss Casey's in there. What's that about? Another time where he's just kind of like, why are you bringing Miss Casey into this? And Cobell says, the light of discovery shines truer on a virgin meadow than a beaten path. And then she says, I am trying something new with Miss Casey. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that later. After she checks Milchick about her decisions and basically like, listen, you over here pulling stunts? Fine. I'll pull my own stunts, and that's that. And just keep it between us, and we'll be good. And Milchick looks real disconcerted about that. So clearly, between Milchick and Grainer, there's clearly an issue they have with her wanting to try to privatize these decisions that she's making. Like, the lack of transparency seems to not be sitting well. So either that's not commonplace for her to do that, or kind of make those decisions of her own accord, or there's a change of demeanor or something, because both of them have each had a moment with Cobell where they're just kind of like, I don't know that I feel comfortable with this, but I guess.
They're starting to get to decisions that they disagree with, and maybe previously they've agreed with what's happening, and they think she's
right
off the rails.
Yeah, but we go back to the office, the MDR office, and Helly's in the washroom, and she's looking at how her Audi has clearly tried to cover up her bruising around the neck with makeup, and she's like, no, you're not about to just erase me. Mm-hmm. So she washes it off fervently, and she just puts it all out there. She's like, people are going to see these scars. I don't care. It is what it is. I'm not going to be erased. That's what it seemed like. Like, you're not going to just push me to the side and make it seem like I don't exist. I exist. And so she comes back out. Of course, Miss Casey's right there. And she's like, you were in there for a long time. Can you describe your time in the bathroom? That's the weirdest question anyone's ever asked.
I really just wanted her to be like, I took a shit, Miss Casey.
She should have. She should have. Would you like to know the grunts, the number of pushes,
right?
The
density of the log in the toilet? Do you want to know? The color?
Oh my gosh. So she just sidesteps it, or tries to sidestep it. Miss Casey's still trying to like get her to talk about how she's feeling, what's going on. And then Mark, in an attempt to kind of save Helly, knocks his coffee over onto Miss Casey's notepad that she was taking such diligent notes on. And he's just like, oh, Miss Casey, I'm so sorry. Oh, looks like you're gonna have to get a new one, I guess. And the supply closet's like, a few minutes away. And she's just like, I can't go to the supply closet. Well, actually, I guess I could, but Helly's going to have to come with me. And Mark's like, no, I got her. I can watch her. It's just a few minutes. And she's like, it's 8 minutes. Round trip. And so she looks and she's kind of like, fine. And so she like starts putting on the pace because she's like, I can't lose time in here. Like, I've got a job to do. I can't be gone long. So she's like trying to book it down to the supply closet and back. And as soon as she leaves, Mark is like, hey, Helly, do you want to come with me to see where the extra pen caps are? And Helly's just like, why would I want to do that? Like,
no, thank you.
He's like, I think you should come with me to see the pen caps. Wink, wink. And she's just like, whatever, I don't care. And so they leave, and as they leave, Dylan remarks, be safe out there, there's weird energy about, which I agree.
All I could think is, bro, you ain't never been more right. Weird very weird energy, and foreshadowing, because the rest of the episode gets weird.
Weirder, like it goes from weird to weirder. Like, we've got kind eyes, we've got 266s, we've got like grim barbarity portraits. Like, what is going on? I get it, this is weird energy. Going back to that quote from Cobell where she talks about the light of discovery and that she's trying something new with Miss Casey, I have sat on that line and marinated with that line for a while, because I'm just trying to figure out, what is Cobell's end game here? Like, what is her aim? What is her plan? What does she mean she's trying something new with Miss Casey? Does she mean she's trying something new on Helly utilizing Miss Casey? Does she mean she's trying something new specifically to Miss Casey, in that, like, I'm trying something new with Miss Casey by putting her in a new environment to help people instead of the wellness center? Does she mean something altogether different? What does it mean?
I think there's definitely with the quote, meaning sometimes you have to try something else, right? Like we've been doing the same thing and getting the same results. But like, again, to what end? What results are we trying to change here by bringing in Miss Casey? Are we trying to prevent Helly from another suicide attempt, or are we trying to improve Miss Casey's wellness abilities? Yeah, I don't really get the point of Miss Casey being there either.
Because, like, the quote leading to that, it seems contradictory. Like, the two don't line up. When she says, the light of discovery shines truer upon a virgin meadow than a beaten path. The first thing I thought was, oh, we're not going to get much out of Helly if she's all beat up. So we've got to get her to feel, like, refreshed. So that was the first thing I thought. And then I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense because she is beaten. So who's the virgin meadow and who's the beaten path? What is that applying to?
Yeah, I don't think it's applying to people. I think it's applying to methods. So the beaten path is whatever their previous methods are, and the
Okay.
virgin meadow is the trying something new that she's trying. Now, we don't know why she's trying something new, but I think that's what the quote means.
That makes more sense than what I was thinking. Yes. But all that to say, I do like your interpretation of the quote. I clearly was overthinking it.
Yeah, I actually was like, this is kind of a nice quote, actually. This is a Cure one that I kind of like, though, because it's like,
He's got some
yeah,
bangers.
yeah, it's like just in life, if you're like, you're trying to achieve something and you're trying the same thing over and over because you think it's supposed to work, but it's not working, at some point, you've got to try something new. You got to take the virgin meadow, not the beaten path. Let's cut through this field over here and try something new. Maybe it'll be better than this path that everyone else has taken. Got to find your own path.
True. Now, I will say, I'm still trying to figure out what the new thing with Miss Casey is supposed to be.
Right.
Is it
Not
just
sure
that she's not in her normal environment? Because that can't be it.
Or have there been previous suicide attempts and it's a different way to react to it, which I didn't think about until
now.
Like maybe there is a set protocol for post suicide attempt and she's trying something different that way.
Trying to do something different. Ah. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. I like it. I like it. So outside of that, I'm not sure that there's much else to really get into here.
Yeah, let's push through because I think we don't have that much notes for the next one too. So I'll just get into it. So the next thing is Miss Casey rushes back with her extra notepads and pens, and she notices Bert from O&D is in one of the conference rooms, and she does like a double take. Like she runs past it, she runs back to him and is like, whatever. But she's like, I don't have time to address this because my main focus she keeps on going back towards MDR. And so Mark starts taking Helly into this area that we haven't seen before. She hasn't seen before, and she takes Helly into a purple room, which is a new color we haven't seen.
We've seen no purple nowhere in this building.
Purple, yeah. And so there he gives Helly a replica of Petey's map that he's been making. He's trying to create it, and he asks if Helly wants to help him, and she's like, I'm not your new Petey. At this point she's already ripped him apart with that other saying where she's like, not with the razor to my throat do I want to be your family. And now like you're trying to, what, you think this is going to be a peace offering? And so then they start going down a hallway. She's kind of mad at him. She's trying to find her way back, and she's like, I don't know where you've taken me. But they're in a spot that is not in use, right? So all the hallways are dark at first and the lights come on with motion sensors. And she's like, where did you take me? And then as this is happening, Miss Casey makes it back to MDR, sees that Mark and Helly are gone, and she's like, oh no, I must go find Helly. And then she, like, as almost as an afterthought, as she's leaving again, tells Irving Bert G is in the conference room. So Irving goes immediately to meet Bert in the conference room, like, oh, why is he down on our side again? And Dylan follows right after, and Irving's about to go in, and then Dylan comes around, pushes Bert back into the conference room, pulls Irving out, closes the door, locks the door, and it's like, are you crazy? Like, we just saw this O&D massacre painting, and now you're still over here trying to fraternize. What are you doing? Like, and then this sends Irving into a panic. Bert is inside, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Irving's like going to the cameras, like motioning, trying to get somebody's attention, like, oh my God, I need to get a manager. I need to get a manager. We need a manager. We need a manager. And that's my only note for this section, is that I love that part.
That was a memorable moment. I will also say, however, before that, when he was in the conference room talking to Bert, before Dylan yanked him out and locked Bert in there, Irving and Bert are like looking at each other, and Bert's trying to say that he was working out a joke and da-da-da, but they like make eyes at each other, and just the look between Dylan, like looking between the two of them, like, what the crap, what is going, are you guys, is this the thing? Like his face
Right.
cracks me up, and he's just like, nope, not allowing it, nope, 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 don't care, don't care. This is about life saving, this is about survival. We're trapping him in here like a goldfish, he's not getting out.
Right.
I just was like, Dylan, this is so extreme. This is one frail old man. Like, what do you think he's going to do?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, it's like I get being afraid of the department as a whole, especially by this point you've learned that there's actually 8 people in O&D, not just 2. So yeah, that coupled with the painting you've just seen, sure, yeah, but one person alone, like you think he's like secretly a super spy who can do
do
all
backflips and
like the karate and the parkour and all the things and like slice you with a pen cap? Like, no, like this frail old man.
this man is barely getting around this conference room to work out his joke. Like, oh boy. But yeah, that's really all to say about that part. There's not much else.
Yeah.
So if we roll forward, then we go back to Helly and Mark. Mark's still trying to press her about like talking to him and what's upsetting her and all this stuff, and she's just like, I'm mad about the fact that my Audi told me I wasn't a person.
Yeah.
Despite how much I wanted to get out, she said I wasn't a person. And Mark's trying to be like, what do you want though? What, forget her, what about you? And Helly's like, I want for her to wake up and feel the life slowly draining out of her and know that it was me. Woo! That's what I want. And I was like, whoo, Helly's hardcore.
Helly is not one to mince words. She's not. She is thoughtful about her word choice, and she cuts deep with her words.
This also means that she has not wholly divorced herself of trying another suicide attempt.
Right.
If anything, it's probably really aided it, because she's like, oh, she wants to see me as a different person? All right, well then this is a homicide attempt. This is an attempt on my life. This is an attempt on your life, since we are clearly separate.
Right. Yeah, she's just gonna try harder.
Oh, that's scary. It's like when you get to that point where you're just that reckless and you're like, I don't care. I want her dead. She's dead to me, so she might as well just be dead.
Yeah.
That's wild. But right as they have that discussion, they hear a weird sound down the hall that sounds like a child screaming, kinda. And they're just like, what was that? So then we head back to the conference room. Bert's still locked in there. There was no manager that showed up, even though Irving is waving at these cameras outright. I'm surprised nobody came down that hall. I'm like, is no one watching, or are they just watching this like a soap opera? Like, I sometimes think they think this is their entertainment, these workers. Right? So then we go back to them talking. Dylan is straight up accusatory of Bert. He thinks at this point, since Helly and Mark have been gone so long, that he probably murdered them, and then he's gonna murder Dylan and Irving next. And so Irving's just kind of like brushing it off. And then I love how he gets close to the window and cups his face. And he's just like, why didn't you just come straight to MDR? Why would you come to the conference room? And Bert's like, I didn't want to upset you. I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me. And he's like, well, why did you lie about the size of your department? Why, Bert? Why? And just again, like this weird, I think it's private but it's not private, like conversation they're trying to have between the two of them. It's just so like innocent and naive Irving, like classic naive like, Irving.
You can't see me, I can't see you.
Right? If I put my hand up, I'm invisible. So then finally Bert's like, listen, there have been rumors about your department. I didn't want to say anything because I don't believe them. I think they're all just rumors and conjecture, but people say things. And so the same way that MDR has been hearing things about O&D, O&D has been hearing things about MDR. And so Irving's like, well, what did you hear? And he's like, well, we heard that you have pouches and larval offspring, and that they eventually will attack others, and then at some point eventually eat and replace the host. And so which is wild. I'm like, of all the things the MDR heard about O&D, none of them were sci-fi in nature.
Right.
You guys have larval pouches and offspring and what?
And Dylan's just like, that is absolutely ridiculous. What? And then Bert's just like, what? I said it's just jokes. It's just jokes. Just jokes. Like, obviously it's ridiculous. I don't believe it. It's just jokes. But they say these things,
And then he turns that into another moment where he tries to like schmooze Irving. He's like, however, could you blame me? I mean, how else could you describe those youthful good looks?
Right.
And Irving's just like, oh, Me?
exuberance. And this is when Dylan really finally confirms, right? And he pulls Irving aside and is like, "Are you sweet on this guy?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
And
Irving's
he's
like,
like,
"What?"
you don't approve of our fraternization. And he's like, no, I don't approve. I don't approve. But because this guy's a snake and he can't be trusted. And
Yeah.
so this isn't about, me not, being okay with you guys dating or whatever. This is about preservation. Okay.
Yeah.
They're the enemy. And I saw that you put in the notes like, oh, Dylan cares for Irving, which I didn't think about that. But yeah,
Yeah,
this is his way.
it was on some level, right? Because at one point, amidst all the like, they're dangerous, da, 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 he kind of quiets a little bit and he's like, it's not safe. So I was like, oh, it's a little moment where you see like to Dylan, Irving isn't just like the annoying coworker that he has to deal with, because that's kind of how all their interactions are. We're just like rah rah,
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
maybe on some level the family vibe thing is working a little bit, and Dylan feels a little bit
Yeah.
protective of Irving. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet in all of this craziness.
And it's interesting too between the two of them, since they do tend to have those interactions back and forth about different methodologies and approaches. And it's clear that Irving has a more innocent, naive outlook in life, and Dylan's more the realist.
Yeah.
And so to see that he's like, listen, I'm trying to help you because you don't get it. This is not a safe situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want something to happen to you because you are too naive to see that this is not a safe situation.
Right.
At least in his eyes. So yeah, it is kind of nice. It's like, oh, this is Dylan's way, I guess, of being like, listen, I might have problems. It's kind of like, I can beat you up, but they can't beat you up.
Right.
Like
Yeah, we're family. I can say those things. You cannot.
mm-hmm.
They can't.
Well, let's get back to Mark and Helly
Oh,
and
Lord.
the shadowy hallway and the weird cries. Y'all, I will never forget when I saw this the first time. It was so jarring and so strange. Mark and Helly get down this hall and it's still shadowy and weird, but then they see a light coming out of one doorway. So you just see a single light coming into this dark hall. And then they look down and there's a baby goat.
This is the cry that they were hearing, which, like,
why?
very oddly does sound like a baby at first. You're like, is this a
Right?
baby? And especially after, all of this baby talk in the previous episodes, it was like, wait, is it a baby? Is it a goat? Is it a baby goat?
Now, here's what's funny. This is a sidebar, and I just thought about this because I forgot that this was a theory that I had the first time I watched. Because Helly was talking about hearing the grumbling man,
Mm-hmm.
a grumbling old man, and Dylan said, you mean the baby cries? I was like, wait, were they hearing this old man with the goats through the walls? Is that what they were hearing?
Oh, I didn't think about
That was my theory.
Maybe.
Nothing has really been confirmed about the break room thing, but that was my theory. It was like, wait a second, is that what that is? Are they just hearing this man screaming at goats and hearing baby goats cry through the wall?
Oh, Lord.
So all this to say, Helly and Mark round the corner and they see all these goats and these hay beds in this white room, and then they see a man in a weird apron sitting in the middle of the room feeding a goat with a bottle.
And this man is huge. Like, he seems
He's huge.
like, compared to these goats, he seems like Hagrid size. Like,
Yeah. Oh.
yeah. Oh,
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah. um, yeah, it's just so bizarre. And he's holding one and he's like bottle feeding it, and then the other ones are running around. It's so strange. It's so out of left
It's
field.
so strange. And so then they go in there. They're just kind of looking as bewildered as all the rest of us. Like, what in the world is this doing here? How did we get here? So then they start trying to talk to the guy. And the guy's like, they're not ready. You can't take them. They're not ready yet. And he gets real defensive. And they're just kind of like, we weren't. And he's like, get out of here, get out of here. And like shoos them off and chases them out. And they just kind of like backpedal and are like, just forget it. Like, just forget it.
Oh, it's wild.
But it was so weird. Like, what do you mean they're not ready? Ready for what? What? It just so many questions about that goat room. Oh, and then we go back to Dylan and Irving, and I suppose they have decided to release Bert as their prisoner of war, and they have this man's hands tied behind his back.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, the funny thing is, at first we just see Bert and Irving walking side by side, and we think, oh, okay, I guess they let him out, and Dylan decided to chill out. Then you get a back view because Dylan is acting like prisoner guard, and he's walking behind them, making sure his hands don't move nowhere. And I'm just like, oh boy.
Right. He needs to be escorted back to O&D because we can't trust this man. Well, Irving trusts him, but I sure don't. So his hands
Sure
need to be
don't.
tied. If I'm going to agree to anything, we cannot move the prisoner without his hands being tied.
So then they get back to O&D. Dylan unties Bert's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then Irving and Bert continue to talk, and they kind of have their little moment in the front room.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Dylan's just kind of like, whatever, and starts walking around. So Irving and Bert have a discussion about like workplace relationships. And he kind of mentions like, oh, it's frowned upon to have workplace relationships that are non-platonic.
Mm-hmm.
And Bert's kind of like, are you saying that's what we are? And Irving's like, well,
Well.
I mean. And so while they're having that moment, Dylan's rounding and he's just like, he's probably looking for someone to pop out of a corner so he can like shank him with his pencil or something. But he's doing rounds. Bert and Irving continue to talk. This is when Bert shows Irving a painting of Keir and Imogene, who is Keir's wife. And it shows how they met, which is that they met as co-workers.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a swab girl. I don't know what that means. I should probably have looked it up. She was a swab girl in an ether factory, and he was the stewman. And the portrait shows him like working some rod over a giant vat, and she's like coming up to do something, give him something, I don't know. And that depicts basically their love and how they found each other. And so Bert is essentially posturing like that can't be true, that Keir would frown upon that because that was how he met his wife. Why would he commemorate that in a painting if he didn't feel that that was like a worthy thing to acknowledge? So in the meantime, Dylan goes roaming around and just happens upon a door that he decides to open. And that door, a storage door, happens to hold the same Grim Barbarity painting that they just saw. And he flips out. And he's like, he's a liar. He said he didn't know anything about this painting and he got it right here. And Bert's like, no. You said it was called the Grim Barbarity. We don't have a painting by that name, Grim Barbarity. And so then Irving takes it. He looks at it and he's like, well, he's right. This isn't the same picture. He's like, look at the badges. And then he's like, what is this one called? And Bert says that it's called the Macro Data Refinement Calamity. And we see in the painting that instead of the green badges coming after the blue badged people, it's the other way around.
Yes. So this is very, very, very effective propaganda on the part of the higher ups, this painting, more effective than anything else. Because think about it, Dylan has only been there for a year. He already knows this story of this alleged massacre. But clearly the departments both have this same story and have had it for years and years, because no one refutes that it's a story that's gone around. Like none of the older people are like, you made that up. You know what I mean? They all know it exists. Whether or not they all believe it or not is not there. But man, oh man. Like the fact that they just carbon copied this painting and just switched that detail. So they both think they're just, wings away on the same floor from department that may come murder them at any time, right? And it also speaks to, wow, Bert and Irving just must have been meant to be together because they both have this fear of each other's department. And despite that, they still continued to spread. It wasn't just one-sided like we thought before.
Right.
It's on both ends. So interesting.
So my question is, we have an actual portrait in O&D.
Yeah.
And it's showing that macro data refinement is going after optics and design. Yes. We get a printout of it being the other way around, but according to Bert, no such painting as the Grim Barbarity of optics and design exists. So then here's my other question. Was there actually a massacre?
Yes. Yeah. I thought the same thing. Same thing as you did. My first thought was it truly macro data refinement against O&D first? Or did they paint one, Photoshop adjust it to whatever color combinations they need? Because these are the two departments we know of, but there may be many departments that they need to make fearful of each other. So maybe they could just swap out those badge colors, in prints. And maybe the true reason that they need to keep them afraid of each other is because there was an uprising or an attempted uprising, but it was departments working together against the higher ups.
If there was a macro data refinement calamity, should we be concerned about MDR and the propensity for them to lose it on everyone?
Right.
And maybe why are they more prone to it than others? Could it be the mysterious and important work that they do?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't trust it. Just the simple fact that there's more than one version, I don't trust it. And I think it could be like you said, macro data refinement is the true one, and then they adjusted it later for propaganda. But I think it's preventative. They all were created at the same time, and it's preventative to keep them from getting together and uprising. Whether or not that happened once already and they're trying to prevent it again, or they're worried that it might happen. I don't know.
We shall see.
Yep.
Well, guys, we are wrapping it up. Ooh. Let's get them over the finish line.
All right. So after Mark and Helly get run out of the goat room, Helly is wondering maybe that's what we're doing. Maybe the numbers are the goats and we're deciding which ones live or die. And Mark tells Helly that even though she doesn't want to be there, he's glad that she's there. And he's like, I'm sorry, that's the best I can offer you right now. And Helly kind of softens up and says, okay, give me the map, I'll clean it up for you. And they have that little like reconciliation. And then at that moment, Miss Casey catches up to them and is like, oh, are you hurt? Is Helly hurt? And they're like, we're okay. She's like, oh, I was scared. Okay, let's go back to MDR. I'm glad. I was scared. And then she escorts them back. And as they're walking back, we see that these halls are also being watched because they're always watching. Like you said earlier, it's just like some sick soap opera. They're not intervening, they're just watching. And Cobell was watching this whole time and allowed them to wander around. And Mr. Grainer checks in and he's like, how many departments are you going to let them find? Like, what are you doing? When do we stop this? And he's like, are you aware of what Mark S. and Helly are up to right now? And she's like, that's your job. Kind of like, I'm watching, but it's your job to find them and intervene, right? So and so she tells him the surest way to tame a prisoner is to let him believe he's free. So she's like, no, this is purposeful. I'm gonna let them wander about, maybe even make Helly feel better because now they've got this camaraderie because they've just witnessed this weird thing together, right? And Mr. Grainer again is just like warning her, the board is not gonna like this. He says upstairs won't look too kindly on this. And she's like, whatever, Mr. Grainer. She dismisses him and she's like, you can talk to me once you find out who helped Petey with his chip. That's the task I gave you. Go do your job, kind of thing. And then Bert decides, after the three of them, Bert, Irving, and Dylan, have discovered that there's two versions and they're really perplexed. They're like, why would they make two versions of the same painting? Bert decides to take Dylan behind the secret door that Irving found in the previous episode to introduce them to the other O&D members. So there's 8 total. So we already know Felicia, and then there's 6 other people in the room, and they're at these huge machines. They're all like filing things into them. They all have like the blue lab coats on.
And they have like tubes that go up into the ceiling.
Yeah, so it's almost like, oh, is this like they're delivering things to other places or are they destroying things? They're in charge of being the historians, right? So are they filing? Like, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
And they all stop when they realize that extra people are there. They're frightened because they all know they're all to keep up the illusion that there's only 2 people, right? Felicia is the only person that's allowed out. So they're just like, you can see the shock on their face that Bert has brought other people. And he's like, this is Irving and Dylan from Macro Data Refinement. Cut to fearful faces, right? Because
they're like the larva people.
Right? They are aware of the macro data refinement calamity that they think is true, right? And Bert's like, they are our friends. And the episode ends there.
The face shot that it ends on with the 3 of them is so funny yet interesting because Bert seems apprehensive, like, all right, I'm about to do this, but this seems like a point of no return. Like, once I do this, can't undo it. Dylan is eyeing everybody like, all right, if anybody tries to attack me from the side or the rear, like, what am I going to do? Like, he seems like he's trying to plan out a stratagem. And then you look over at Irving and he's just delighted. He's just like kid in a candy shop, like, oh boy, I'm meeting my boyfriend's friends. This is great. And like, I'm just like, the juxtaposition of these faces is everything. But going back to Cobell and Grainer,
yes.
She responds to him by saying, yes, daddy. And I'm like, what is y'all's relationship?
Yeah, and it's so strange because it was like a coy, flirty thing, but also like poorly done. Like she could be more flirty. You know what I mean? It was so awkward.
It almost seemed like she was trying to weird him out by being oddly flirty.
Yeah, because the flip side, the other way it could have played was like, okay, dad, like you're always trying to boss me around, but it wasn't like that. To me, it wasn't enough of a pendulum swing to the opposite side that it was like a weird combo of both, maybe. Yeah, maybe she was trying to do it on purpose. Maybe she was trying to weird him out. All I know is that my notes say weird AF. Like, it was so weird. Awkward. Ew, daddy. Yes, daddy. Ew.
Yes, daddy. And like, it just seemed like one of those responses, like you said, where it's like trying to be sexy, but clearly not really trying to be sexy, because I'm sure if she wanted to, she could. But it seemed like, I'm going to say this to freak you out because you don't get to one-up me. I one-up you. Like, and he did like have a face that was just like,
Right.
Okay. So, and then of course she reads him the riot about what his job is and what he needs to do. And I'll take your advice when you go do your job. Like she
Right.
drags him. And I'm just like, geez.
Right.
Oh,
Almost like, here's just in case you were getting a little too comfortable, a little too familiar. Let me remind you who is actually in charge here.
who is the HBIC?
Mhm.
So, anyway, guys, that is episode 5, The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. A wild ride from start to finish. We still don't know what's going on with these goats. You know, we've got this painting that now everyone's seen, but like, what's the deal with it? We've got the reveal of now all of MDR has seen all of Optics and Design. I mean, Mark technically hasn't, but I'm sure they'll fill him in at some point because how are they going to keep it from him? I don't see Dylan and Irving as being the type that will be able to keep that to themselves.
Right.
And then, of course, Helly and Mark have their own adventures, so it's just like, I can't wait till the next day, quote unquote, when everybody comes in with stories like, oh, y'all, guess what?
Everybody in on a whole lot of
So, man, a lot to look forward to, you guys. It's just going to get better. If you are watching this episode by episode, know that it is going to get better and better from episode to episode. We can't wait to talk about this last leg. We're more than halfway through at this point.
Yeah.
So there's 4 episodes left and lots that's going to happen and lots to be excited about. So be looking forward to that. As always, we want to hear from you guys. If you guys have insights, if you have additional art things you want to share, like Kali did today, or if you have other tidbits you'd like to inform us about or theories,
follow us at the UUR Pod on Blue Sky and Threads, or you can email us at the UURpod@gmail.com.
This has been the UUR. And remember, should you find yourself contorting to fit a system, dear listener, stop and ask if it's truly you that must change or the system.